Well, crikey. So, each of you has come here today hoping to be more effective, hoping to do a better job. And what a wonderful place to start. And that's where I began, hoping to do a better job. So, first of all, disclosures. Whenever you hear somebody speak, you should always question, why do you think that I am here? Has somebody paid me to stand up and speak to you? Am I going to make money from a product? Why am I here? Please do that, because so many people stand up and, what shall I say? There's some sort of financial thing behind it. I tell you truthfully, nobody pays me to do anything, and when they do pay me, I actually usually donate the money to the PHC, so that in that way I'm able to stand up and say nobody pays me to say anything, that I'm driven by a wish to be more effective and by a wish for you to be more effective. So I'm starting with some hope. This is Chris. I love that guy. I absolutely adore him. Look, so there he is on your right. And what a sad case he was, and he wanted help. And he didn't have hope. And there he is on the left. I met him on Monday night. He's just started with fasting. He now belongs to 2 separate gyms. He's off his medication. He's singing and dancing. And those sort of cases give me joy. And I'm sure they give you joy too. The real question for all of us is, how do we get more of those? How does each of us get more people like Chris? And I'm wanting to share with you how I have been effective. I've thought a lot about what made a difference. What made a difference and what might make a difference to you. So let's see. You'll see there are a couple of themes there. One is hope, that I'll come back to again, the sort of psychology of this. And the other is the little sugar with the cross there, which for me represents physiology. Because of course I worry about diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is my main worry. So I'm clicking. And nothing. Oh, there it is. So you've all seen this before. I was a GP without hope. In 2012, I saw diabetes as progressive, deteriorating, and I just waited for you to get worse, and then I'd add in more drugs. But it didn't sustain me. I knew in my heart it wasn't right. It was very depressing for me and the patients. And what a shame I woke up aged 55. What a tragedy. What if I'd woken up at the age of 35? What could have I achieved then? So that's why I like to share this, because some of you, most of you, maybe all of you are younger than 55. So start now. I was asleep for far too long. These are figures many of you have seen before, but some of you haven't seen me speak before, and there's always the question of maybe I'm a fraud or just a show-off. That's quite possible. But just to explain, this is hemoglobin A1C based data, sort of QOF data on the quality of our diabetic care at the Norwood surgery. Down is bad, up is good. So you'll see on 2013, 2012, my surgery was the worst there. We were worse than NHS Southport, formerly CCG, NHS England. We were terrible. Very sad. And now we're very happy because we're on the top there. We're doing something different for the entire population of our diabetes register. And that is something. So we've taken what I believe to be hopeless. So if you'd asked me in 2012, I thought I was doing a good job. And do you know what? I blamed the patients because they wouldn't listen to me, because I was telling them what to do and they weren't doing it. So clearly it was the patient's fault. And you've all now spotted what's wrong with that, because it was my fault. I was not taking responsibility for my own effectiveness. And whatever you think it's the patient's fault, you will struggle, I think, to make progress. Because, you know, people would like to be healthy, and they are intelligent. And that's what I've discovered Isn't that ridiculous that I've discovered patients are intelligent and they want to be healthy? Crazy, but anyway, it's all simple stuff, isn't it, really? Yeah. Moving on. Oh, again, I'm so proud. Perhaps I've got these amazing results by drugging them all. Why not? Why not? I was before. Why not do it now? But actually, if you look, this is wonderful data. So every GP in the country, there's data on us collected by openprescribing.net. And my GP practice spends the least by a long way, of all the practices in our area. So actually, we're spending £50,000 on drugs for diabetes alone, less every year than is average in our area. That is massive, £50,000. Last year, we sent back to the Treasury £57,000 of money we could not spend. How often does that happen in the health service? The tragedy is they don't let me keep the money and roll it up into patient services. So the Treasury are laughing with my money. It's annoying. But nevertheless, we're not using drugs. And other practices around the country are achieving very similar things. It isn't just me. Another case. This is Roy. And he's consented to this. He knows we're chatting today. And look how we've changed him. This is in 2 years. What I want you to do, again, this is hemoglobin A1C. And the question is, where the question mark, what happened on that day? What did we do that changed his life where he suddenly changed behaviour? So I have 10-minute appointments. So that was a very important 10 minutes because he suddenly changed, as you see, and put his diabetes into remission. He's also come off his blood pressure medication. His lipid profile is the best it's been for years and years, and his blood pressure is the best. So, blimey, in a 10-minute appointment, what if you could do that several times a week, several times a day? So what goes on in the 10 minutes is two things. One is psychology and the other is physiology. So let's just explore that a little. Right. So it's boring this for some of you because I tend to chat on in a similar way, don't I, every time? But you're going to have it again. So I train young doctors. I have done for 25 years. And I find that doctors, we're always telling people what to do. We're always saying, you need to lose weight, you need to exercise more, you need to whatever. But you know, it's much better to engage the patient first. Engage the patient first. The question is, how do you do that? So how, in a 10-minute appointment, how would you engage the patient so that you've started with motivation before you start telling them what to do? We're travelling at speed today because they want me to finish on time. So this is the GRIN model which my genius wife came up with. She is a consultant health psychologist, specialises in behaviour change, particularly the role of hope. She spent her entire working life looking at the role of hope in chronic disease and the difference it makes. And then she spent 2 years coming up with this, which is how would a busy clinician use psychology in very short consultation. So we're going to canter through it rapidly. But then again, I haven't got very long in consultation anyway, so we should be able to do this in 5 minutes. Let's see how we go. So listen, GRIN stands for something, G-R-I-N. There we are. G stands for goals. So, how do we find shared goals with our patients? A good starter is to talk about, if you could change something about your health, what would you like to change? So rather than starting straight off with diabetes, which is my agenda, what might the patient's agenda be? And then the next thing, really, really important, let's give the example. So many patients say to me, well, of course, I know I need to lose a bit of weight, I would like to get rid of my belly, or want to wear fashionable clothing, I don't know, anything. Always ask, what difference to your life would that change make? Never leave it alone that they want to lose weight, because that's a sort of dead sentiment. There's no reality to it. Because the more you can get people to imagine a preferred future, the more likely they are to do it. What difference would weight loss make to you? Well, do you know, I have an idea I might have more energy. Or I'm not breathing very well and the stairs are a problem. I'd love to be able to go up the stairs just whenever I like. I'm told all sorts of things by my patients every day about their hopes. Then when I've got shared goals with my patients, that feels so great. If you're working with your clients, it feels good because you're not telling them off anymore. You've got shared goals. Far less likely to have a complaint if you've got shared goals and you're working on those. That's G. That's a toolkit, and that stands for resources. People do not come to you as a blank slate. They have experience, they have resilience, they have all sorts of wonderful gifts. Explore them. Have you lost weight before? How did you do it? Tell me more how you did it. How did you feel when you did it? Who else might help you? Who have we got at home that's interested? Everybody has resources. Everybody has intelligence. And it's really worth looking into this because it's friendly. It's basically friendly, inquiring about how clever people are or what they've done before. Resources. The ruler stands for increments. So many people have goals in life. So many of us have goals. But how many of us achieve those goals? And often it's because you haven't taken that first step up the mountain. So that first step may be your most important step. So can you, in 10 minutes, with somebody who wants to lose weight, what might be the first thing that they think they could do based on their experience? So, again, this is a daily thing for me. What might the first thing, what might you do that might help you to success before I see you next time? You might give up sugar in tea and coffee. It might be you give up biscuits. All sorts of things, I'm told. But at least they've chosen it. It's an increment. It's a start. You've got a way in. A little crack has appeared. They're starting to be a bit hopeful and they're beginning to move. Final thing, noticing. Jen feels that noticing is perhaps the most important and most powerful thing that any of us does, if you can start noticing positive stuff. In medicine, we're trained to notice misery. We're trained to inquire about symptoms and depression and pain and suffering. But how about you start inquiring about, has anything been better since I last saw you? Over time, you can build a different expectation and a different paradigm with your clients. I have been doing this actually for 15 years now with my patients, this idea of hope and resilience and all this in 10-minute appointments, and before then it was 7.5-minute appointments. So I won't have it that you can't do it, because I have for 15 years. It is possible. And my patients now are delighted to celebrate success because they know I'm really interested. And we spend a lot less time talking about pain and depression and far more what's working for them. Noticing. Very, very powerful. Works in your own life if you just think, well, when do you feel better? That's how I've refined my diet, actually. Which days do I feel better? What have I done? Have I taken exercise? Am I socialising? What's happening when I'm my best self? And don't you think we all learn from experience in a way by doing that sort of thing? So that's GRIN. Probably, I hope, under 5 minutes on GRIN. G-R-I-N. Come on. There we go. Noticing. There we are. Back to Chris. So you'll notice, if you look on the hemoglobin A1C, a kind of average, how averagely sugary have you been in the preceding 120 days before the blood test? That's a hemoglobin A1C. So up is bad and down is good. You go along and you'll see he put his diabetes into remission. He was one of my very early cases, and he did that, I think, in 2013. But look what happened afterwards, and I've labelled it carb creep, and how many of us have seen patients who do well, and then, I don't know, something happens and they drift. The big question is, what do you do? Nurses are always asking me, what do you do with people who fail? No, they're not failing. They're potentially learning. So Chris, we're having a chat about, well, where do you think? What's going on? And also remind him, how did you feel before? Terrific. How did you do it? I gave up bread and sugar and biscuits. Could you do it again? Yes, I could. Are you going to? Well, I will. And he did it again. Look. And the second time, he's done even better than the first. That is reframing failure. It's not failure, it's an opportunity to learn and notice what works. So many doctors, when they see carb creep, just add in drugs. Again and again, I see, they say, lifestyle has failed, and they say to the patient, sadly, it's a bit worrying now, we really need to start ramping up and adding this and that. Don't do that. Give the patient a second chance. Why don't you? Because I find there is the potential to learn even better. I've got some who I call triple dippers, even better. First time he learns it quite well. Second time he learns it really well. Third, he's really got it. I have a whole series of triple dipper graphs, which I put on Twitter for you all. So, learning from mistakes. I've learned a lot from mistakes. A lot. But don't beat yourself up about mistakes. It's a learning opportunity. Crikey. So that's psychology dealt with now. That didn't take long, did it? The whole of psychology, you've done it now. There you go. What about physiology? So we're going to now, at speed, go through helping patients understand their own physiology in terms of liver function, triglyceride, obesity and hunger. Sounds like a kind of exam question, doesn't it? But I'm going to try and make it the way I talk to patients, because I think if they understand their own physiology, they're in a good position to make choices. You can't ask people to make wise choices when they don't understand the basis of their choices. So again, before you come to advice and what to do, some time on physiology. So I spend a lot of time talking about insulin. What does insulin do? So I explain to patients that when you eat a Mars bar, your blood glucose goes up. Only God designed you in such a genius way that even though a rising blood glucose is dangerous, you've got this amazing hormone produced by the pancreas which gets rid of the sugar in your bloodstream. And that's what keeps you safe. So you have a Mars bar and your blood glucose is up and then comes down. The trouble is, if you have diabetes, your insulin doesn't work quite as well. It's still working, but not as well. That's the first problem. The second one is, where does insulin put that sugar that you just ate? Do you know, I never thought about that once. Never once. And I was giving people insulin all the time. And the type 2s get fatter. And I never thought, why? Not once did I think, where does insulin put that glucose? And if you eat more glucose than you need for your muscles, it's going somewhere, and this is where it's going. It's pushing glucose into cells. Which cells? Of course, there is your muscles for energy. But the thing is, my average patient with type 2 diabetes weighs about 100 kilos. So they are taking in more calories than they need. So those extra calories of glucose are going into other cells, not their muscles. It's going into belly fat to become even fatter, which is the link of central obesity. Because the only thing, when your glycogen stores are full, the only thing you can do with extra glucose is turn it into triglyceride. Oh, and that's where triglyceride comes in. All of this triglyceride, where does it come from? Do you know, for so many years, triglyceride, I tried to ignore it because the results upset me, because I got all these people with high triglyceride, but I didn't really know what to say to them. Like, where did it come from? I didn't really know. What should they do about it? I didn't really know. Did drugs help it? Not much. So I stopped talking about triglyceride and said, let's just redo the test in a year. Push it, and the doctors in this room know this is what we do. We fudge it, don't we? We fudge it and we say, well, it's not too bad, let's do it again in a year. But I also knew that the liver function test in the practice, 25% of all my patients have abnormal liver function. This is serious because this represents fatty liver, which is a very serious risk factor for heart disease and liver failure and all sorts of things. So my patients are beginning to understand that glucose and insulin can be linked to fats, their own belly, and the triglyceride level I gave them, the abnormal liver function they knew about already. They've heard about fatty liver. So they're beginning to see glucose in a physiological environment that they can understand. And I assure you, on Monday night, a 73-year-old lady said to me, "Do you know, that's the first time I've ever understood my fat belly. The first time ever, thank you, but why did you not explain that years ago, Dr. Unwin?" That was Monday night, she's 73. Just a reminder about triglyceride. We should talk about triglyceride far more. Triglyceride and HDL need a lot more scrutiny. Yeah. So the counterpoint study, this is the wonderful work of Roy Taylor in Newcastle, who has changed the world by letting us know that diabetes remission, or reversal as he calls it, is a perfectly reasonable goal. And what a beacon of hope type 2 diabetes remission is becoming. What a beacon of hope. And he explained that as you take in more glucose than you need, your liver fills with fat. And there is a liver filling with fat, and that a fatty liver is instrumental in reducing insulin sensitivity. So this is key as to partly how we have worsening type 2 diabetes. And then he points out, he's done this by scanning livers and pancreases because he has a wonderful budget. I have no budget, so I'm left with gamma GTs, blood tests, but we can look at what Roy does. It's very relevant. And then the next thing that happens, or it will, if I keep pressing the button, I'm pressing the button, there we are, we're catching up. The pancreas fills with fat as well. And what does that do to beta cell function, the very cells that produce insulin? Of course, they struggle. Anyway, the good news is that all of this is reversible. Roy Taylor talks about cutting the head off the snake. You can do it in different ways. You can reduce carbohydrate intake by reducing carbohydrate intake. Or you can have bariatric surgery. If you like that, will do it as well. Or you can go on a very low-calorie diet. They all work, and I have patients that do all of them. But everybody would have to say, well, what's easiest for me? Bariatric surgery does work, but it makes some people very unhappy afterwards because you can't reverse it. And I've had patients who have become very unhappy because the bariatric surgery didn't really deal with why they were overeating in the first place, which is, I mean, they were overeating for a reason, and all you've done is put them into low-calorie jail, and a significant number of them drink. Or I've had a couple that's been actively suicidal because they can't eat enough. And then they're liquidizing Mars bars because they were eating for a reason. People do things for reasons, and if you don't deal with the reason, bariatric surgery has not necessarily helped. It does help some people. Right. I'm moving on. Oh, I've gone on too fast. I just put this in. This is one of my patients. And if you look there, these are two graphs over the same time, but look at that triglyceride level. I think it was about 8. At the same time as the hemoglobin A1C was very high too, reversing the diabetes, the triglyceride plummeted. And that, actually, I've done hundreds of patients now, and triglyceride tends to drop when you have less sugar, because triglyceride is a function of carbohydrate metabolism, and HDL, the protective cholesterol, does the opposite. I'll talk about that more, but that graph's just to show, and the patient, of course, was so delighted. They go home with the graphs, they're so made up. One form of feedback. How are we going to give patients feedback on how they're doing? The EMIS computer systems are brilliant at generating graphs. I've got data going back 20 years. But anybody can produce feedback, or you can look at your trousers or your belt. It's all feedback. Feedback is, do people say you look really smart or you look well? Feedback comes in many, many forms. How do patients like their feedback? I love the graphs anyway. I love the graphs. I'm pressing the button, yeah. Hunger, can we understand hunger? So, I thought about this a lot, hunger, because I was hungry till I was 55 years old. Always hungry, always wondering about what was the next meal, or had the children, were they full and was there any pudding left? You know, I'm watching the bowl, because I'll just finish that for you. No, Dad. They were trying to hide it, because I'd eat their meals as well as my own. I was eating biscuits all day long. I was continually hungry all my sort of waking adult life till I was 55, and I never thought about it. Then a patient asked a really intelligent question recently. This was a lady, and I think she weighed something like, let's say, 120 kilos. And she said, Dr. Unwin, this is so ridiculous. I am telling you the truth. I am always hungry. And she said, I eat because I'm really hungry. How many of you have heard this? Do you know what? Usually people are telling us the truth. They're usually telling you the truth. Why am I so slow to learn that most people tell the truth? It's ridiculous. They do. And she was. And then she asked a brilliant question. Because she said, so why am I hungry? Because I think she said, I reckon I've got 3 months of food right here. So why? Why am I continually hungry? I think insulin is a clue. Insulin is a clue. So nearly every cell in your body is a genius dual fuel engine. Absolutely genius. You can burn glucose or you can burn fat. Dual fuel. And that's why you don't die if you go on a hunger strike, because you just burn your fat. And cavemen didn't always get to eat every day. And when they didn't eat, they didn't die. When the glycogen reserves, there's not much glycogen. When that's gone, they didn't die. You can fast. We were talking about fasting earlier. But here's the rub. Insulin, because of the imperative to get down blood glucose, insulin stops you from being able to burn fat. It stops you. So if I cheat a bit, if I have moderation in my carbs, I can't be a fat burner anymore. I have type 2 diabetes, so for me to be a fat burner is genius and brilliant. Because I'm lively, I can run, I am well, I don't need drugs, I burn fat. And I'm slim too, which I wasn't, it's great. But a little bit of cheating, I can't burn fat anymore, then I'm hungrier, and it all goes to pieces. So insulin, part of the reason, when I think back all those people I put on insulin, type 2 diabetics on insulin gained on average something like 8 or 9 kilos. They were hungry, they ate more, the insulin makes them hungry. Your own insulin may make you hungry, and it stops you from being able to burn fat. It locks away that fat so you can't burn it. Being a fat burner, very interesting. Very, very interesting. And I think it's partly how anybody here that's done low carb, patients are surprised they're not hungry. Somebody here has heard that, haven't you? They say, it's weird, I'm not hungry. And it's because they're starting to burn fat. It takes a little while. Think about it. Anyway, that's why it's not good for me to have the odd biscuit, because I become ravenously hungry. Just recapping. So, insulin and dietary glucose is central to liver function, triglyceride, obesity and hunger. Quite a list, isn't it, insulin? Central obesity is also linked to 8 different cancers. And cancer research are looking into this. Central obesity is worrying in many, many ways. Why is my hemoglobin A1C so high? If you're telling me it's an average of how sugary I've been, because I haven't been sugary. What's the answer? The answer is starch. So starch is glucose molecules holding hands. Digestion comes along and breaks them back down into surprising amounts of glucose. And this is why bread, potatoes, rice, biscuits, all these things, crackers, cereals, break down into a lot of glucose. And if you have diabetes or if you ever wear a Freestyle Libre, you know really fast how much sugar you're getting. And because we're moving quickly, so I had a problem. NICE guidelines advise you all that you will instruct patients to have low glycemic index sources of carbohydrate. It's on the NICE guidelines. Only just about nobody understands the glycemic index or the glycemic load. You try explaining the glycemic load to an 18-year-old student. They're so bored by the time you get there. They are so bored. My partner's got really bored with me because I became so enthusiastic about the glycemic load because it's really, really important. He said, no, you're not communicating very well because you need to get it over faster. So this is why I did the teaspoon of sugar equivalent thing, which represents the glycemic load. So if we look, on the right is my first charts I did. A small bowl of basmati rice, 150 grams, is exactly the same as 10 teaspoons of sugar. In terms of glycemic load, whether you have 10 teaspoons of sugar or the bowl of rice, the result on your blood glucose is exactly the same. As part of this is based on a published peer-reviewed paper. We redid the calculations for 800 foods, and there are now 7 of these infograms. They were shortlisted for a prize by NICE this March, and they now appear as an endorsed resource by NICE itself. So all 7 infograms are part of the NICE guidelines package now. And so if you're advising patients, these are really useful because they can see a small slice of wholemeal bread is the same as 3 teaspoons of sugar. So if you have 4 slices of bread, you just have 12 teaspoons of sugar, etc. But some things don't put your blood glucose up, like eggs don't make any difference at all. Neither does, also steak doesn't much. There's all sorts of things you can eat. I'm eating stuff without putting my blood glucose up, and that's the basis of a lower carbohydrate diet. There's Matt Hancock. He asked to see me because he's the Minister of Health, and he asked to see me, and he's holding up those infograms because he personally thinks it's a great idea. And he gave every member of the ministry a copy of my work. Oh, bananas. We talked about bananas earlier. Why? Yes, I know I hate bananas, and that is because for patients they're such a trap because they think they're healthy. On, again, Monday night surgery, somebody with terrible diabetes, and he was having 2 or 3 bananas a day. Apparently somebody told him about potassium. I said, you know, there's potassium in loads of stuff. He'd no idea that a ripe banana is about the same as 6 teaspoons of sugar. Here's me wearing a Freestyle Libre on a low-carb diet. And you'll notice my blood glucose, that is something to show off, you know, because that's a flat reading for days. I'm eating stuff, nothing's happening with my blood glucose. Till on a Friday morning, I ate a single banana for you to see what happens. The blood glucose went up to 10.2 and eventually to 10.5. It doubled my blood glucose, a single banana. So banana for somebody with type 2 diabetes is not a reasonable choice. It made me feel unwell. And I wish to avoid medication. So for me, knowing this is really, really useful. Galloping. So it's not just about type 2 diabetes. I have a published research cohort. I just published a paper, there's another one coming out soon. If you just look at my cohort, so at this point, I think there's about 130 of them who've been low carb for 2 years, and I'm keeping scrupulous data because we need to collect data. First of all, look at the average hemoglobin A1C when they start at 71. I am not cherry picking easy cases. The average when they start is 71. My average patient is 63 years old, they weigh about 100 kilos. Very similar, interestingly, to your average clients, as we heard from Trudy this morning. Really, really similar. They're heavy people, just on the wrong side of middle age, like me. I'm the wrong side. Anyway, look, the cholesterol. We were worrying about lipids earlier on. The total cholesterol drops, improves significantly for this group. The HDL actually goes up, protected, goes up significantly. Cholesterol ratio improves significantly. Triglyceride drops by 1/3. It fits in with the physiology I'm teaching my patients. Gamma-GT liver function improves by 40 to 50% within weeks, and that's because the liver is emptying of fat. These are not people who are drinking. I used to think they were. They're having too much sugar, and when they stop it, the results are amazing. Look at those blood pressures. Improving significantly, and That includes 20% of deprescribing of all the drugs that they were on for hypertension. So I'm deprescribing hypertension stuff and stuff for diabetes. Average weight loss, 8.6 kilos over 2 years. I didn't think that was possible. If you'd asked me 25 years ago, I would say that the guy standing up here was a liar, because I did not think that was possible. And that's why I've had to collect the data, so that people will begin to see that it is possible. What was that? Oh, we're running out of time. We've already talked about the consensus report of the American Diabetes Association, because look, they're saying reducing overall carbohydrate intake for individuals with diabetes has demonstrated the most evidence. For heaven's sake, the most evidence. There are, as I said, 62 RCTs. There are meta-analyses. What do we need? They have said there's the most evidence. Let us stop talking about there's no evidence for low carb. The studies are all there. The interesting question is why it's been ignored. Right, going on quickly. I'm moving there. Yeah, we published a paper, British Journal of General Practice, because as clinicians, you need to know about safety prescribing of drugs for diabetes, and also the compatibility of various medications with going low carb. So I'm just flagging, that's open access. We paid, the PHC paid for that to be open access, so that any clinicians can read about what drugs do what, and what's safe or not safe. Oh, we're on to the last case. So, here we are, somebody with a hemoglobin A1C of 65, that was the 29th of January this year, and you'll see it drop down very rapidly. He was my 58th case of drug-free type 2 diabetes remission. I think I'm up to 68 now. There were 2 more on Monday night. On Monday night, I took one woman off insulin completely. Off insulin, type 2 diabetes, off insulin. How genius, she's so proud. I didn't know that was possible. It has transformed her life. Being on insulin is scary. It's scary, and she's immensely proud. She was told by every healthcare professional never to reduce her insulin, but just increase the carbs. And what does that do? That poor woman put on 20 kilos doing that. And then one day, she went to the clinic and said, I'm going to gradually reduce my insulin and reduce the carbs. And they said, don't do that under any circumstances, it's dangerous. She's now planning her letter of complaint because she says, why did nobody tell me? Why? Anyway, this is that case. Another one. He's 53 years old. He came to me because his sitagliptin was making him drowsy, and he was wondering, his memory was poor. And he was on the sitagliptin, and his hemoglobin A1C was high. What I actually did, I did a really very, very bad thing. I prescribed for him a Freestyle Libre on the NHS. Okay? And look what it's done. He has learnt that his problem was cornflakes and milk. He's come off the expensive drug, sitagliptin. I have saved the CCG for just 6 weeks of Freestyle Libre things. That's all it's taken, 6 weeks. I have saved the CCG money. But that is not, I do not care. I do not care. I have saved that man his self-esteem, the drowsiness, he's off all drugs. He looks fantastic, his blood pressure's better. He's learnt, he needed the feedback. He didn't know it was cornflakes. He didn't know that giving up cornflakes would make such a difference. And again, he's so proud. He wants you to see that because he knows I did a thing against guidelines. But they're only guidelines, because I'm an independent healthcare professional. But I will do as I think fit and best for my own patient. In this case, and these Freestyle Libre, this is a game changer because people are just buying them. You can buy them, and then the phone, your own phone will read them. So people are really finding out what puts up their blood glucose in very large numbers. And if as healthcare professionals we don't wake up to this, we're looking foolish. I look foolish never having told the very first lady about bread. She was very cross with me. She said, Dr. Unwin, you never told me. You just gave me metformin. Why? She was right to be cross. Patients are finding out, it's leaking out. We must, as healthcare professionals who care, we must move on. Feedback, very important. The freestyle lever and other things. Technology is moving on very, very rapidly, and it's leaving some of us behind, in my opinion. So, this is the last slide. The last slide. Type 2 diabetes is not necessarily chronic, progressive, deteriorating. For most patients with type 2 diabetes, the cause is diet. Occasionally it's stress, but nearly every single patient, it boils down to diet. Dietitians will inherit the world. You will. Will inherit the world. It makes such a difference. Type 2 diabetes remission, a wonderful beacon of hope, and can be done in different ways. We should be talking about it because that beacon of hope is marvellous for what it does to people when I tell them, we can probably reverse that. I probably won't need drugs. They're amazed. They're amazed. And so, you get people who say, I couldn't possibly give up bread. I'm told that all the time. I couldn't possibly give up bread. But that is because, if they're saying that to you, you haven't motivated them first, because they will give up bread if they know that they can have a different future, as I have given up bread. I just wish to be well. So if I have to give up bread, I'll do it. So many of my patients, given the choice between lifelong medication and lifestyle, I'm doing that now, I think since 2013. I've asked every single patient, what should we do? You've got diabetes, do you want some support and lifestyle, which I think will work, or we could start metformin today. Not one patient, not a single patient since 2013 has asked me for that metformin. Not one. Because I've invested in hope and explaining how lifestyle might make a difference first. Whereas before, my default was the prescription to get you out quickly. And yet that little bit of time, how I have been rewarded and how I've loved my job now. I'm having an amazing time. As I say, I'm there on Monday night. We've been running groups. We do them in groups, many of the patients, 20 at a time, 30 at a time. What a wonderful experience. All these hopeful people standing up saying, well, I find this works and I find that works. Amazing. And it saves loads of money. The group work needs looking into some more. Can save a lot of money running groups. What else? Oh, I think that's enough, don't you? Apart from, did you see the old guy there? We'll go back a slide. Another one of my patients. I love that guy. He's over 80. And he came to see me 2 weeks ago, and he'd been doing squats in the gym. And he's over 80. He looks amazing. He's got all chiseled and all the rest of it. He was on insulin 2 years ago. And the tape measure, I'm holding the tape measure where his weight was 2 years ago. And he came to me, his goal was to drive safely, because being on insulin is really worrying when you get older, because maybe you're not safe. So he had a clear goal of walking better and safe driving, and his journey has taken him to being off insulin, metformin, ACE inhibitors, and his statins. And he's free. He's free and taking responsibility. He's wondering what next. It kind of recruits, when they do one thing, they think, well, what shall I tackle next? Such a beacon of hope. And you often think about older people like they can't do stuff. Oh, yes, they can. The oldest I've done is 91 years old. And I'm going to leave you on that note. Thank you so much. I bet I've overrun. I think it's inspirational to meet with other people who really care. And that's infectious, isn't it? And we're all swapping ideas and can hear all the chatting going on out there. It's just, you hear so many people who moan about being a clinician and we're not paid enough and nobody loves us and all the rest of it. And really the privilege, of course, is being able to, we became clinicians to make a difference. When you come here, there's lots of people interested in making a difference. Nobody's told me they're not paid enough today or worried about the pension. My patients, every time. So on Monday night, I saw the most wonderful woman, and she's come off insulin. Type 2 diabetic, come off insulin. I go home so happy. People whose lives are changed and improved. It's why I became a doctor in the first place. My number one take-home message for the delegates is try and notice what works. I think many of us focus on what doesn't work and what is painful and difficult. But I've discovered that really thinking about how am I effective, what made a difference, and trying to be honest about that did work and that didn't work. Do more of what works. Be sensitive to what works. Avoid miserable people. Try and mix with hopeful people who are up for change.